The strange thing about hunger is that the body can remember it even in a room full of food. A late dinner, an empty stomach, a quiet ache before sleep. These feel small today, almost temporary. But for most of human existence, hunger was not an accident in the day. It was part of the night itself, lying beside the fire, inside the ribs, beneath the dark. So what did the human body learn from all those unfinished meals? And why did 90% of human history go to sleep hungry? When hunger comes before sleep today, it often feels like a small interruption. It may come after a missed dinner, a long day of work, a delayed meal, or a quiet decision to eat later than usual. The room can be safe. The door can be locked. Food can be only a few steps away, wrapped in plastic, waiting in a refrigerator, stored in a cabinet, or glowing behind the small light of a delivery app. Yet the body does not always behave as if safety has already been settled. An empty stomach can make the darkness feel different. The mind can stay slightly awake. The body can lie still. But somewhere inside it, an older system keeps listening. It is not panic. It is not drama. It is a low form of attention, the kind that rises when the body senses that one of its oldest promises has not been kept. Sleep asks the body to let go, to lower its guard, to spend hours without searching, moving, defending, or choosing. Hunger asks the opposite. Hunger says there is unfinished business. This small conflict may be easy to ignore in modern life, because modern hunger often happens inside abundance. But the human body was not shaped inside abundance. It was shaped across long ages when food was never guaranteed simply because the sun had set. Before farming, before storage rooms, before markets, before grain sacks, before livestock pens, before the long chains of transport that now move food across continents, a human evening could arrive with uncertainty still inside it. A group might have found fruit, roots, shellfish, eggs, honey, insects, seeds, small animals, or meat from a successful hunt. Or the day might have produced little. The difference between those two evenings was not just comfort. It changed the way people rested, shared, waited, and watched the night. For early humans and other ancient members of our lineage, the body was always negotiating with the landscape. Energy had to be found before it could be spent. A long walk across dry ground, a cold wind at dusk, the need to carry a child, the work of cracking bones, digging tubers, collecting plant foods, or following animal tracks all drew from the same limited reserve. By night, the body counted what the day had given it, even if no one counted in words. A full belly could make the fire feel warmer. A poor meal could make the same fire feel smaller. This is why the feeling of going to bed hungry is not only a private discomfort, it reaches down into the conditions under which human beings became human. The earliest people did not live in a world where meals arrived on a schedule. They lived inside moving seasons, uncertain animals, scattered plants, changing weather, and landscapes that could be generous one week and nearly empty the next. Hunger was not always starvation. It was often something quieter and more ordinary, not enough to feel settled, not enough to make sleep deep, not enough to know that tomorrow would begin with strength. A person could survive many such nights. A group could survive many such seasons, but the body would learn from them. It would learn to notice emptiness. It would learn to protect energy. It would learn that darkness and hunger together meant vulnerability. In that sense, the modern empty stomach before sleep is not a new signal. It is an old one placed in a new room. Today the light switch works, the walls stand firm, and food may be nearby. But the body's deeper memory comes from a time when night did not mean the end of need. It meant the search had paused without always being finished. It meant children, elders, hunters, gatherers, and resting bodies gathered around whatever the day had allowed them to bring back. And when there was not enough, the night did not explain itself. It simply arrived, and the human body had to lie down inside it, carrying hunger as quietly as it could. It is strange that a modern person can feel hunger while surrounded by more food than most human beings in the past could have imagined. A kitchen may hold rice, bread, fruit, meat, oil, sugar, salt, cans, packets, frozen meals, and food carried from places the sleeper has never seen. The shelves may contain more stored energy than a small band of ancient foragers could gather in several uncertain days. Yet when the stomach is empty, the body does not first ask how much food exists in the house. It reacts to what is inside the blood, the gut, the muscles, and the nervous system at that moment. The body is not comforted by the idea of abundance in the same way the mind is. A person may know, calmly and rationally, that breakfast will come in the morning, but the deeper body was built before breakfast had a name, before morning meals could be assumed, before stored grain could turn tomorrow into a plan. Hunger still enters the body as information. It changes attention. It can sharpen smell. It can make small sounds more noticeable. It can pull thoughts back toward food even when a person is tired. In a safe bedroom, these reactions may seem out of proportion. In the older world that shaped human biology, they were not out of proportion at all. They belonged to a life where a missed meal could not always be corrected by opening a door. For much of human existence, the space between wanting food and obtaining food was filled with labor, risk, distance, knowledge, and luck. Plants had to be recognized correctly. Roots had to be dug from the ground. Shellfish had to be gathered when tides allowed. Nuts and seeds had to be cracked, cleaned, ground, or roasted. Animals had to be tracked, trapped, scavenged, or hunted. And even success did not guarantee equal portions for everyone. Food was not only a thing to eat. It was a relationship with land, season, memory, tools, fire, and other people. The modern body still carries traces of that relationship, even when the landscape has been replaced by walls and electric light. That is why hunger before sleep can feel deeper than a simple lack of food in the stomach. It touches the old bargain between energy and rest. To sleep well, the body must believe that it can afford stillness. It must slow the muscles, lower awareness, reduce movement, and trust that the night will not demand too much. But hunger tells the body that the reserve is smaller than expected. It does not need to become extreme to matter. Even mild hunger can remind the body that energy is limited, and limited energy was once one of the central facts of being human. Ancient people were not helpless before hunger. They knew landscapes with a precision that most modern people have lost. They read animal movement, plant cycles, tracks, weather, water, ripeness, decay, and danger. They shared, stored in small ways when possible, cooked when fire was available, and learned from older members of the group. But knowledge did not make the world obedient. A skilled person could still return with less than hoped. A familiar place could still become poor in a dry season. A hunt could fail. A storm could close a path. A child could need food at the same time adults were tired. A group could sit near a fire with enough to survive, but not enough to feel truly full. That difference matters. Human history was not only divided between feast and famine. Much of it may have lived in the middle state, where people were alive, moving, adapting, and sharing, yet still often short of complete fullness. Modern life can make that middle state hard to imagine, because food today is often measured by choice. What do I want to eat? When should I eat? Should I eat less? Should I eat later? But for most of the human story, food was more often measured by what the land had allowed. The body remembers that older measurement more quietly than the mind. It does not need a history book to respond. It only needs emptiness, darkness, and the approach of sleep. Then an ancient pattern can wake beneath modern comfort, the sense that rest is easier when the day has given enough, and harder when the body lies down still waiting. For most of the human story, hunger was not an emergency that broke into normal life. It was often woven into normal life itself. This does not mean every ancient person was starving every night, or that early human life was only misery. That would be too simple, and probably untrue. Humans survived because they were skilled, observant, social, inventive, and deeply adapted to their surroundings. Many groups knew where certain plants grew, when animals moved, how to use fire, how to share food, and how to return to places that had fed earlier generations. There were good days, rich seasons, successful hunts, full bellies, laughter near fires, and moments when food was enough. But the deeper pattern was still different from the world many people know now. Food did not arrive because a clock said it was time. It arrived when the land, the weather, the animals, the plants, the tools, the bodies, and the group all came together well enough. If one of those links failed, the evening could become thin. This is the older meaning of going to sleep hungry. It was not always collapse. It was the quiet end of a day that had not given enough. A person could lie down alive, protected by others, warmed by a small fire, surrounded by familiar voices, and still feel the hollow space beneath the ribs. That space belonged to the beginning of our species. Long before cities, fields, coins, shops, and written calendars, human beings lived by turning attention outward. Eyes scanned the ground. Hands tested bark, stone, shell, bone, fruit, and soil. Feet followed paths remembered by the group. Ears listened for movement in brush or water. The body was not separate from the search for food. It was the instrument of that search. Hunger pulled the body into motion during the day, and at night it measured the result. A full meal meant more than pleasure. It meant warmth might last longer. Milk might come more easily for an infant. A wound might repair with less strain. Muscles might begin tomorrow with more strength. A thin meal meant the body had to choose carefully. It might reduce movement. It might keep sleep lighter. It might make the mind return again and again to where food could be found when morning came. In this way, hunger helped shape attention, memory, cooperation, and even the feeling of time. Tomorrow mattered because the body still needed what today had not provided. This is why the long past cannot be understood only through great inventions or dramatic migrations. It also has to be understood through evenings, through the slow dark after an uncertain day, through children being given food before adults, through elders depending on the strength of younger walkers, through small pieces of meat divided carefully, through bitter roots softened by heat, through seeds gathered one by one, through bones cracked for marrow when other food was scarce, through groups staying close not because life was always peaceful, but because a single hungry body was more vulnerable than a hungry body among others. The beginning of humanity was not a straight road toward comfort. It was a long negotiation with need. Hunger was one of the pressures inside that negotiation, not as a single disaster, but as a repeating condition that returned with seasons, failed searches, long walks, cold nights, dry places, injured bodies, and growing children. When we say that much of human history went to sleep hungry, the point is not to imagine endless suffering. It is to remember that fullness was not the default state from which life began. Fullness had to be found, earned, carried, cooked, shared, defended, and sometimes simply hoped for. Modern abundance can hide this from us. It can make hunger seem like a mistake, a delay, or a personal inconvenience. But in the deep background of the human body, hunger was one of the oldest teachers. It taught caution, it taught patience, it taught movement, it taught memory. And when night came before enough food had been found, it taught the body how to rest without being fully reassured. Before food could be stored behind cold doors, it belonged first to the living world. It was not still. It did not wait. A herd could move beyond the ridge during the night. Fish could leave shallow water when the season changed. Birds could nest in places too high to reach. Fruit could ripen for only a short time, then fall, rot, dry, or be taken by insects and other animals. Roots could remain hidden under hard soil. Honey could be guarded by stinging swarms. Eggs could vanish before human hands found them. Even when a landscape was familiar, it was never a pantry. It was a place of signs, timing, memory, and uncertainty. To a modern mind, food often appears as an object. It sits on a shelf. It has a label. It can be bought, saved, reheated, carried, and eaten later. But for most of human existence, food was more like a moment that had to be met at the right time. If the group arrived too early, it was not ready. If they arrived too late, it was gone. This shaped the human body and mind directly, because the first problem was not how to choose food, but how to encounter it before something else did. Our ancestors had to read a world in motion. They followed tracks that could fade in wind or rain. They learned which plants were useful and which might be dangerous. They noticed where animals drank, where shells could be gathered, where certain trees gave fruit, where digging might reveal tubers, and where old bones could still hold marrow. It required patience, attention, and knowledge passed through many lives. Yet even deep knowledge could not freeze the world in place. A dry year could make plants fail. A colder season could push animals elsewhere. A flood could change a riverbank. A fire could empty a familiar area, while opening new growth later. The human search for food was therefore never only about hunger. It was about reading change. At the beginning of our story, long before fields made some landscapes repeat the same crop again and again, the body had to move through a living map that kept rewriting itself. This is one reason sleep could arrive before fullness. A person might spend the day inside real effort and still return with less than hoped, not because the group was careless, not because they did not understand the land, but because the land was not made for human schedules. It fed many creatures, and humans were one hungry species among others. A fallen carcass could be found by vultures, hyenas, wolves, or other scavengers before people reached it. Nuts could be taken by birds and rodents. Berries could disappear into the mouths of animals that noticed ripeness earlier. Meat itself, when obtained, did not remain safe forever. In warm conditions, it could spoil quickly. Without modern refrigeration, preserving food required drying, smoking, freezing in cold climates, fermenting, storing in pits, or guarding it from insects and animals. And these methods depended on place, weather, tools, and knowledge. Before such practices became more developed, many foods had to be eaten, shared, or lost. The night after a successful find could be rich. The night after a mischance could be thin. This unevenness matters. It reminds us that ancient hunger was not simply the absence of skill. It was the natural result of living, where almost every food source had its own season, defense, movement, decay, and competition. The human stomach was tied to fruiting cycles, animal paths, tides, rainfall, cold, heat, daylight, and distance. A meal was never only a meal. It was the brief meeting point between a body that needed energy and a world that did not arrange itself around that need. So when darkness came, hunger could lie down with the group not as a failure of life, but as one ordinary outcome. The fire might burn. Voices might still be calm. Children might sleep close to adults. But somewhere beyond the circle of light, food was still moving, hiding, ripening, spoiling, or disappearing, and the human body had to wait until morning to begin reading the world again. Hunting and gathering were not simple acts of taking food from nature. They were skilled ways of living with a world that could never be fully controlled. A successful day might look effortless from far away, people returning with meat, shells, fruit, roots, seeds, or honey. A fire being prepared, food passed from hand to hand as the light lowered. But behind that evening there could be hours of walking, watching, testing, waiting, and failing before anything was found. The human body did not earn food by wishing for it. It had to spend energy first, often before knowing whether that energy would come back. This made food search one of the deepest risks in early human life. To look for food while already hungry is to make a wager with the body. Walking uses strength. Digging uses strength. Carrying a child uses strength. Climbing, tracking, cutting, cracking, throwing, scraping, and returning to camp all draw from the same reserve that hunger is already trying to protect. If the day goes well, the body is repaid. If the day goes poorly, the body ends the evening with less than it began. This risk was especially sharp because early humans lived in landscapes where effort did not always match reward. A group might follow animal tracks for a long distance and find nothing at the end. A hunter might wound no animal. A trap might remain empty. A digging stick might uncover roots too small to matter. A tree that held fruit in memory might be bare when people returned. Shellfish might be available only when water, weather, and timing allowed. Even scavenging, which may have mattered in parts of human evolution, required being in the right place before other animals had finished or before the remains became unsafe. Skill raised the odds, but it did not remove uncertainty. This is important because the old human world was not divided neatly between competence and hunger. People could be very competent and still go to sleep without enough food. Their knowledge might be deep, but the living world had its own movements. Animals did not exist to be found. Plants did not ripen according to human need. Weather could erase signs on the ground. Darkness could end a search before the body was satisfied. When we imagine ancient food gathering, it is easy to picture only the successful return. Meat near the fire, seeds in a basket, roots roasting in ash. But for every visible meal, there were probably many invisible hours when people were measuring the land with their eyes and feet, asking without words whether the day would give enough. The beginning of humanity was shaped in those hours as much as in the moments of success. Our ancestors did not become human only by eating. They became human by searching together, learning together, failing together, and surviving the gap between need and result. That gap could follow them into sleep. A person might lie down after a day of real effort, not because nothing had been done, but because what had been done had not been enough. In that condition, hunger carried information about the landscape. It told the body that the group might need to move differently tomorrow. It told memory to hold the place where tracks were last seen, where fruit was nearly ripe, where birds had gathered, where water had changed, where another group might have passed before them. Hunger was painful, but it was also instructive. It pressed the mind to remember. It made the next day matter. It made food knowledge valuable across generations. Older people who knew dry season plants, safe routes, animal habits, or hidden water could become important not because they were stronger, but because they held patterns younger bodies had not yet learned. Children grew up watching not only eating, but searching, waiting, sharing, and reading signs. In a world without guaranteed meals, survival depended on more than muscle. It depended on attention stretched across time. Still, even the best attention could not promise a full night. That is the quiet truth behind the title. Hunger followed humans not because they were simple or helpless, but because they lived inside an uncertain food system long before food became a stored product. The night could arrive after effort, after knowledge, after cooperation, and still find the body only partly fed. And when that happened, sleep did not come from comfort. It came from exhaustion, closeness, firelight, and the hope that morning would open the search again. The end of a day did not always mean the end of hunger. In modern life, evening often feels like the time when food finally becomes settled. Work stops, a meal is prepared, a table is reached, and the body learns that darkness belongs to rest. But for most of the human story, darkness could arrive before the search was complete. The sun did not wait for a full stomach. It went down whether the group had found enough or not. That simple fact shaped human sleep in a way that is easy to forget. Night was not only a soft boundary between one day and the next, it was also a limit. After a certain point, vision weakened, movement became riskier, cold could rise, predators became harder to see, and the landscape that had been readable in daylight turned uncertain. A group might know that food was still somewhere beyond the firelight, but knowing did not mean they could safely reach it. There could be roots under the soil, animals moving in the distance, fruit beyond a dark slope, shellfish along a far shore, or a carcass hidden somewhere in the brush. Yet the body had to stop. Feet could not search forever. Children could not walk endlessly. Older people could not keep pace with every possible chance. A hungry evening could therefore be created not by the complete absence of food in the world, but by the closing of time. Daylight ended the attempt. This gives ancient hunger a different texture. It was not always the hunger of a ruined landscape. It was often the hunger of almost enough, nearly found, not reached in time. Perhaps something had been gathered, but it was small. Perhaps meat had been shared, but the portion was thin. Perhaps plant foods had filled the stomach for a while, but not deeply enough to carry the body into sleep with ease. Perhaps the strongest adults ate less so children could eat more. In such a night, the group was still alive, still together, still doing what humans had learned to do. But the body did not receive the full reassurance that modern people often expect from dinner. It entered sleep with a question left open. This question belonged to the beginnings of human life as a social species. When early humans rested together, hunger did not belong to one body alone. A thin meal changed the emotional weather of the group. It might make people quieter. It might make sharing more careful. It might make tomorrow's route more important. Someone might remember a tree that would ripen soon, a watercourse where animals passed, a place where stones could crack bones, a patch of ground where tubers had been found in another season. Hunger before sleep therefore carried memory forward. It tied the night to the next day. It made rest less like an ending and more like a pause inside a longer search. This is one reason the human body could not treat sleep as complete escape. Sleep had to happen even when need remained. The body still had to repair, conserve warmth, protect children, and gather strength for morning. But hunger could keep sleep lighter, more broken, more alert to sound and movement. Not every hungry person would lie awake in the same way, and we cannot know the inner nights of prehistoric people with certainty. Still, biology gives us a careful clue. Energy shortage affects attention, mood, temperature, strength, and the feeling of safety. When those signals met darkness across thousands of generations, the human night was shaped by more than dreams. It was shaped by unfinished food. The great distance between then and now can make this seem remote, but the pattern remains understandable. A person who lies down hungry today may not be in danger, yet the body may still resist the idea that everything is finished. It may hold a small alertness under the blanket. It may return again and again to the thought of food. That reaction is not a mistake. It is a message from a much older world, where night could close over a group before the land had given enough. To go to sleep hungry was to accept that the body would wait in the dark, holding its need quietly until morning made the world visible again. Nature does not feed living things in equal portions. It works in pulses. A forest can be heavy with fruit for a short time, then nearly empty. A river can bring fish close in one season and hide them in deeper or colder water in another. Grasslands can fill with grazing animals when rain has been generous, then thin out when dry months stretch too long. Nuts can fall in abundance, but only after a tree has gone through its own rhythm. Roots and tubers may remain under the ground, but finding them takes knowledge, digging, time, and strength. For ancient humans, this unevenness was not background scenery. It was the calendar of the body. Long before written months, clocks, harvest records, or weather forecasts, people learned time through hunger and fullness. The body knew when certain places were worth returning to. The eyes knew which colours meant ripeness. The hands knew which plants resisted the digging stick, and which could be pulled free. The group knew that a rich place today might not remain rich tomorrow. This is why the idea of eating every day in the same way would have been strange for most of the human past. The living world did not offer steady meals. It offered openings, a short window of fruit, a run of fish, a migration passing near enough to follow, a nest found before it was empty, a patch of edible plants reached before insects, birds, or other animals took their share. When the window closed, hunger returned not as a surprise, but as part of the rhythm. The first human bodies were shaped under these changing conditions. They did not live inside permanent famine, but they also did not live inside permanent plenty. Their lives moved between them. Some days may have been full enough to leave the body warm and quiet. Other days may have ended with only a little food, or with foods that filled the stomach but did not fully restore strength. The important point is not that ancient people lacked intelligence. It is almost the opposite. They needed intelligence because the world was uneven. Memory mattered because abundance moved. Cooperation mattered because no single person could always meet the timing of land, weather, animals, and plants alone. A child learning from adults was not only learning what food looked like, the child was learning when the earth changed, when berries softened, when roots were worth digging, when animals grew lean, when cold made movement harder, when rain opened a place, and when drought closed it. Hunger helped teach this calendar, because the body remembered shortage more sharply than comfort. A night of mild hunger could point backward to what had failed, and forward to where people might go next. Across deep time, this seasonal reality likely touched every layer of human life. Movement routes, temporary shelters, group size, sharing patterns, birth timing, tool use, fire use, and food processing all existed within the larger question of when energy would be available. If a season was generous, people could stay longer, repair tools, tell stories, feed children better, and rest more deeply. If a season was poor, the same group might need to move farther, divide food more carefully, rely on tougher plants, search longer, or accept thinner sleep. The night did not erase the season outside. Cold, heat, rain, and dryness entered the body through the amount of food the day had allowed. In this way, going to sleep hungry was not just about one missing meal. It was about living in a world where the source of life rose and fell beyond human control. Modern food systems have softened this rhythm for many people. A person can eat summer fruit in winter, meat from far away, grain stored from another region, or food produced by machines and transported over long distances. But the older body was built before this smoothing of time. It belonged to a world where the belly followed the season more closely than the mind follows a calendar today. To understand why so much of human history went to sleep hungry, we have to begin with that simple, quiet fact. Nature did not fail to provide evenly. It never promised evenness in the first place. A body that expects food at fixed hours is a very recent body living in a very recent world. The older human body was trained by something less regular. It knew that there could be days of enough followed by days of less. It knew that a rich place could become poor, not because anyone had made a mistake, but because the season had turned. In a world without fields, shops, grain silos, or cold storage, food was not arranged into breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It came in patches, bursts, traces, and chances. A group might find ripe fruit and eat well for a short time, then move through days when fruit was gone. They might reach a river when fish were easier to catch, then later find the same river less generous. They might gather nuts, seeds, or roots in one season, then depend on different foods when the land changed. The body had to live inside that pattern. It could not demand the same meal at the same hour every day. It had to bend around the world. This bending was one of the quiet forces that shaped human life from the beginning. Energy came unevenly, so the body learned to use energy unevenly. On better days, people could move with more strength, carry more, share more, repair more, and sleep with deeper warmth. On poorer days, the body might slow down. It might make movement feel heavier. It might sharpen attention toward food. It might make sleep less settled. These responses were not signs of weakness. They were ways of surviving inside a food supply that rose and fell. Hunger was a signal that the body was entering a narrower mode of living. It asked the muscles to be careful. It asked the mind to remember. It asked the group to judge whether to stay, move, wait, dig, search, or share differently. Modern life often separates hunger from landscape. A person feels hungry and thinks about a kitchen, a restaurant, a store, or a delivery. But for most of human existence, hunger pointed outward into the world. It pointed toward hills, rivers, trees, animal paths, shorelines, caves, grasslands, and places remembered by older people. It was tied to weather, distance, ripeness, and risk. This means the human body did not evolve around the idea of constant supply. It evolved around cycles. The stomach might be full after a successful day, but the body still had to be ready for tomorrow's uncertainty. A strong meal did not erase the possibility of a lean one soon after. This may be one reason human beings became so attentive to storing, sharing, and remembering food. Even before large-scale farming, people could dry certain foods, smoke meat in some places, keep knowledge of seasonal locations, carry useful tools, and return to landscapes that had fed them before. But these actions did not create a world of permanent plenty. They were ways of softening an unstable world. They show how deeply humans understood the problem. The problem was not only hunger in the moment, it was the rhythm of not knowing when enough would return. When night came after a thin day, the body did not experience that hunger as an isolated event. It was part of a longer pattern. Maybe the season was turning cold, maybe animals were moving away, maybe certain plants had not yet ripened, maybe the group had reached a familiar place at the wrong time, maybe the landscape still held food, but not food that could be found before dark. Under such conditions, sleep became part of adaptation. The body still needed rest, even when the stomach was not satisfied. It had to conserve heat, protect strength, and wait for daylight. A hungry night was not empty of meaning. It taught the body that food came and went. It taught the group that no single meal could be taken for granted. It taught memory to stretch beyond the present day. This is why the old human pattern was not a simple line from hunger to fullness. It was a slow movement between them, again and again, over thousands of generations. The body did not live by a perfect schedule. It lived by what the season allowed, what the land revealed, and what the group could find before darkness closed the search. The hunger that followed ancient people into sleep was not only made by an empty stomach. It was made by weather, distance, darkness, cold, rain, heat, insects, animal movement, and the slow turning of seasons. A person could feel hunger in the belly, but its cause might be far outside the body. It might begin with rain that lasted too long and made travel difficult. It might begin with dry ground that held fewer plants. It might begin with cold that pushed animals away or made human movement more costly. It might begin with heat that spoiled meat faster, or with a river that changed, or with a forest that had already been stripped by birds, monkeys, rodents, insects, and other hungry lives. The body felt one signal, but the world behind that signal was enormous. This is what made ancient hunger so different from the hunger many people know today. It was not only a private feeling, it was the weather entering the body, it was the season becoming flesh. It was the landscape after a long day saying that enough had not been found. For early humans, and for the many human groups who lived before farming became widespread, food was tied directly to the condition of the earth around them. If the land was generous, the body could rest more easily. If the land was poor, the body carried that poverty into the night. A cold evening could become more than discomfort. Cold asks the body to spend energy simply to stay warm. If food had been scarce that day, the body faced two pressures at once: not enough energy coming in, and more energy being used to hold the core of life steady. A dry season could change the meaning of distance. A place that once had water might become empty. Animals might travel farther. Edible plants might be smaller, tougher, or hidden deeper in the ground. A rainy season could also bring difficulty. Mud could slow movement. Rivers could rise. Tracks could disappear. Firewood could become damp. In such a world, hunger before sleep was not separate from cold feet, tired legs, wet skins, aching hands, and the small calculations of a group deciding where to go when morning came. The beginning of human life was shaped inside these joined pressures. Our ancestors did not experience environment as something outside the story. Environment was the story. The body was always meeting it. The stomach, the muscles, the skin, the eyes, and the nervous system were all part of the same negotiation with place. When the day had been lean, the night carried the memory of that negotiation. A person lying near a fire might know, through experience rather than words, that a certain valley was no longer worth searching, that a certain plant would not be ready for days, that animals had moved with the rain, or that the group had reached the wrong place at the wrong moment. Hunger made the map sharper. It turned land into memory. It made the body remember where enough had once been found, and where emptiness had returned. This is one reason the title reaches deeper than a simple statement about food. To say that much of human history went to sleep hungry is also to say that human beings slept under conditions they did not fully command. They slept beneath seasons, not above them. They slept after days when the world had been read carefully but had still given little. They slept with bodies that could not pause their need just because the sun had gone down. In a modern room, hunger can feel like an error in planning. In the older world, it was often evidence of belonging to nature. Every creature was trying to live from the same changing earth. Humans were unusual in their tools, memory, fire, language, and cooperation, but they were not free from the basic rule that energy had to come from somewhere. When that somewhere became harder to reach, the night became thinner. The fire could reduce cold, but it could not bring back fruit that had fallen weeks earlier. Tools could open bones, cut plants, scrape hides, dig soil, or shape wood, but they could not make animals remain nearby. Memory could guide people toward old food places, but it could not force those places to be generous again. So the hungry night became a quiet meeting point between human intelligence and natural limits. It showed that the human body could adapt, endure, remember, and cooperate, but it also showed that adaptation did not mean control. The body went to sleep hungry because the world that made it was alive, changing, and never arranged around human comfort. The human brain is expensive. It does not look heavy compared with the whole body, but it asks for a remarkable share of the body's energy. Even in quiet moments, even when a person is lying still, the brain continues to maintain attention, memory, temperature control, breathing rhythms, social awareness, fear, hunger, and the endless background work of staying alive. This is one of the great paradoxes of being human. The same organ that allowed our ancestors to read tracks, remember landscapes, make tools, use fire, share food, and pass knowledge across generations, also made the human body more dependent on steady energy. Intelligence did not free people from hunger. In some ways, it made hunger more serious. A larger brain gave humans a wider relationship with the world, but it also meant that the body had to keep feeding a demanding inner fire. For a small animal with a simpler nervous system, a lean day may still be difficult. For a human body carrying a large brain, a lean day placed pressure on one of the most energy-hungry organs in nature. This does not mean early humans were weak. It means their strength had a cost. Their thinking, planning, remembering, teaching, and imagining all had to be paid for through food gathered from unstable landscapes. Every tool shaped from stone, every remembered water source, every careful choice of plant, every social rule around sharing, and every evening near a fire rested on the same question. Had the body taken in enough energy to keep this mind alive through the night? The brain cannot simply shut down because food is scarce. It must keep working. It must help the body decide whether to conserve or move, whether to sleep or stay alert, whether to follow memory or respond to danger. Hunger therefore reaches the brain quickly. It can change mood, narrow attention, make food thoughts return, and pull the mind toward tomorrow's search. In the ancient world, this could be useful. A hungry brain was not just suffering, it was being directed. It was being told that the body's future depended on finding energy again. But that usefulness did not make the feeling gentle. A person lying down after a thin day might feel the body's tiredness and the mind's unfinished work at the same time. The muscles wanted rest. The brain still held the map of need. It might keep alive the memory of tracks, a stand of trees, a shoreline, a dry riverbed, a place where bones had once been cracked, or a slope where roots might be found. This is where hunger becomes more than a stomach signal. It becomes a pressure on human awareness. The earliest human lives were shaped by a brain that could stretch beyond the present moment, yet the body still depended on the present landscape. That tension was never simple. A large brain helped humans survive uncertain food supplies by improving cooperation, memory, tool use, and learning. But it also required the very energy that uncertainty made difficult to secure. This may be one reason food became so central to human social life. A hungry body needed calories, but a hungry brain needed continuity. It needed older knowledge, group memory, shared roots, learned techniques, and the quiet trust that someone else might know where food could still be found. The fire at night was not only warmth, it was also a place where information could remain alive, where younger people watched older hands, where children learned what could be eaten, what should be avoided, and how long hunger might have to be endured before a better place was reached. To go to sleep hungry with such a brain was not the same as simply running low on fuel. It was to carry an intelligent, remembering organ into the dark, while the body had not yet been fully reassured. The brain made humans extraordinary, but it also made the human night more delicate. Rest required energy. Dreaming required energy. Waking again required energy. Even the hope of finding food in the morning required a mind still clear enough to read the world. So when much of human history went to sleep hungry, it was not only the belly that entered the night unfinished. The brain did too, holding hunger as memory, as attention, and as the quiet cost of being human. A human body never spends energy in only one place. Even in stillness, it is dividing a limited supply among many quiet demands. The heart keeps moving blood. The lungs keep drawing air. The liver manages fuel. The immune system watches for injury and infection. Muscles repair small damage from walking, lifting, digging, climbing, carrying, and sitting in cold ground. The skin holds warmth in or lets heat escape. The brain continues its costly work of sensing, remembering, dreaming, and preparing. When food is plentiful, these demands can feel invisible. The body pays for them without asking the mind to notice. But when food is thin, the balance changes. Energy becomes a kind of internal budget, and the body must decide, without words, what can be afforded tonight. This is one reason hunger before sleep had such deep meaning in the human past. It did not only mean the stomach was empty, it meant the body had less fuel for everything the night required. In the world where humans began, the day itself could be expensive. A person might walk for hours across uneven ground, carry tools, gather wood, hold a child, dig roots, climb rock, wade through water, process tough plants, scrape hides, crack bones, or follow tracks that led nowhere. Each movement spent energy before food was certain. Then evening came, and the body still had to keep warm, repair tissue, support the brain, and protect enough strength for morning. If the day had given little, sleep became an act of careful economy. The body could not simply close its eyes and become free from need. It had to keep life going on a smaller supply. Cold made this sharper. A cold night asked the body to defend its core temperature, and that defense is not free. Heat is made from energy, shivering, tightening the body, staying close to others, tending fire, choosing shelter, and covering the skin, all belong to the same struggle to keep warmth from leaving. If a person had eaten well, cold might still be difficult, but the body had more to spend. If food had been scarce, cold reached deeper. Hunger and cold together were not two separate problems. They joined inside the body. The muscles felt heavier because energy was limited. The mind might stay more alert because the night felt less secure. Repair could be slower because the body had to protect immediate survival first. For early humans, this was not theory. It was lived through skin, breath, bones, and fatigue. The same body that needed fuel for walking also needed fuel for warmth. The same body that needed rest also needed vigilance. The same body that needed to heal also had to wake and search again. Reproduction added another layer. A pregnant body, a nursing mother, a growing child, and an injured adult did not experience hunger in the same way. Growth and reproduction are energy-hungry processes. Milk must be made from the mother's body. Children need energy not only to move, but to build bones, brains, muscles, and immune defenses. In a hungry season, the group's food supply was not just feeding present adults. It was feeding future generations' fragile bodies and the continuity of the group itself. This makes ancient hunger a social pressure, as much as a biological one. Who ate first? Who received the softest food? Who could endure less? Who had to walk tomorrow? Who was carrying a child? Who was too old or hurt to search far? These questions may not have been spoken in the same way everywhere, and we should be careful not to imagine one single pattern for all prehistoric people. But the biology is clear enough. Energy shortage does not fall equally on everybody. It forces living beings into trade-offs. The human story began inside those trade-offs. A hungry night might mean less fuel for warmth, less ease in sleep, less strength for repair, less patience in the mind, and less certainty for the young. Yet the body had to continue. It had to ration without stopping life. It had to protect the brain while saving the muscles. It had to keep the heart steady while the stomach waited. It had to let sleep come, even when sleep could not feel completely safe. This is why going to bed hungry was never only about missing food. It was about the whole body asking how to spend what little the day had returned. Hunger is felt most clearly in the stomach, but it does not stay there. It spreads through the whole living system. It can make the limbs feel slower, the hands less steady, the mind more fixed on food, the skin more aware of cold, and the night less easy to trust. In the long human past, this mattered because hunger rarely came alone. It came after walking, carrying, digging, climbing, searching, watching, and waiting. It came with darkness. It came with weather. It came with children needing warmth, elders needing care, wounds needing repair, and a group needing enough strength to begin again in the morning. The belly may have been the place where hunger announced itself, but the entire body had to answer. A thin meal before sleep meant the body entered the night with less room for choice. It still had to keep the brain active enough to dream, sense, and wake. It still had to hold the heart in rhythm. It still had to protect temperature when the air cooled. It still had to mend small injuries from the day. It still had to preserve muscle for tomorrow's search. A modern person can often separate hunger from survival because the next meal is usually predictable. But the first human bodies did not live with that reassurance. For them, Hunger could be a message that the whole system was under pressure. It told the body that the day's energy had not fully returned. It told the mind that the landscape might need to be read again. It told the group that the next movement mattered. This is why a hungry night in deep history was not just an uncomfortable night. It was a biological narrowing. The body had fewer resources with which to do everything life required. If there was cold, warmth became more expensive. If there was injury, healing had to compete with immediate survival. If there was a nursing infant, the mother's body carried a need beyond her own. If there was a child still growing, hunger touched not only the present moment, but the future shape of that child's body. If there was an elder whose strength was fading, the group's sharing became part of that person's survival. Hunger moved through relationships as well as organs. It changed how food was divided, how movement was planned, how long a group could stay in one place, and how carefully people watched the signs around them. In that sense, hunger helped shape human society from the inside. It made cooperation more than kindness. It made memory more than thought. It made tools more than objects. A stone flake, a digging stick, a basket, a fire, a path remembered across seasons, all of these were ways of answering the same bodily pressure. The human body needed energy, and the world did not always give it easily. The body's response to hunger, therefore, became part of the larger human story. People learned to stretch food through sharing. They learned to make tough plants more useful through pounding, soaking, roasting, or cooking when possible. They learned to crack bones for marrow, gather small foods that modern eyes might overlook, follow animal movements, and return to places where a previous generation had found enough. Yet every one of these skills shows the same truth from another angle. Hunger was common enough to require intelligence. If fullness had been the ordinary condition, so much attention would not have gathered around food. So much memory would not have been stored in the group. So much social life would not have formed around the fire, the kill, the gathered roots, the ripening tree, the shared child, and the old person who remembered where to go when the land became poor. To go to sleep hungry was to carry the unfinished work of the body into the dark. It was the brain, muscles, skin, blood, memory, and social bond, all meeting the same shortage. The body did not simply want food because the stomach was empty. It wanted food because being human was expensive. A large brain, long childhood, social life, movement across landscapes, warmth through cold nights, and care across generations all required energy. Hunger exposed that cost. It reminded the body that intelligence had to be fed, that cooperation had to be fueled, and that survival was never only a thought. It was a living body lying down in darkness, trying to make one day's small supply last until the next search could begin. Fire changed the human relationship with food more deeply than almost any other discovery, but it did not remove hunger from the night. Before cooking, much of what the living world offered was difficult to use. Raw meat could be tough. Roots could be fibrous. Seeds, nuts, and grains could be hard, small, or protected by shells and husks. Some plant foods carried bitterness, toxins, or defenses that made preparation necessary. Bones held marrow, but only if they could be broken. Tough animal tissues held energy, but only if teeth, tools, time, and heat could make them easier to eat. Cooking softened many of these barriers. Heat could make starches more to be labeled, break down fibers, reduce some dangerous microbes, and make certain foods easier to chew and digest. A cooked meal could give the body more usable energy from the same landscape. It could reduce the work of jaws and guts. It could turn roots, meat, seeds, and scraps into food that children, elders, and tired adults could handle more easily. In this sense, fire was not only warmth in the dark, it was a way of opening hidden energy inside the world. For a species with a large brain and long childhood, this mattered greatly. A cooked meal did more than please the mouth. It helped feed the expensive human body with less strain. It may have supported the long path by which human bodies became different from those of other apes. Smaller teeth than expected for our size, a digestive system shaped around energy-rich foods, and a social life drawn around shared preparation. Around fire, food could be made safer, softer, and more useful. The evening could become a place where raw things were transformed, where the day's findings were stretched, divided, warmed, and made more valuable. Yet this is where the quiet paradox begins. Fire could improve food, but it could not guarantee food. It could soften a root only if the root had been found. It could roast meat only if meat had been obtained. It could warm hands, but not summon animals from an empty valley. It could make a meal richer, but it could not force fruit to ripen, fish to gather, rain to come, or a wounded animal to fall within reach. The human body gained a powerful tool, but the world remained uncertain. Cooking may have raised the value of what people found, but it did not erase the problem of finding it. A fire with nothing beside it is still only fire. Its light can gather people, protect them, comfort them, and make the darkness feel smaller, but it cannot fill the stomach by itself. Many ancient evenings may have held this contrast, the presence of one of humanity's greatest tools, and still not enough food to make sleep easy. A little gathered plant food might be roasted carefully and shared. A little meat might be divided among many mouths. Bones might be cracked and warmed for marrow. Tough pieces might be softened so no usable energy was wasted. These acts show skill, not poverty alone. They show how serious energy was. Human beings learned to make more from less because less often had to be enough. Fire also changed time. Food could be prepared after sunset if there was fuel, safety, and something to cook. A group could sit longer around heat, extending the usefulness of the day. Teaching and sharing could happen while food softened in embers. But the body waiting near the fire still knew whether the meal was enough. The smell of cooking might even make hunger sharper before it eased. All of this belongs to the beginning of the human story. Not comfort replacing hunger, but intelligence working beside hunger. Fire gave humans a new power over food once it had been found. It made the world more digestible. It made the night warmer. It helped turn roots, meat, and seeds into energy for brains, children, movement, and memory. But after the flames rose and the smoke drifted upward, the oldest question remained close to the body. Had the day given enough to sleep deeply, or only enough to wait until morning? Fire could change the food that entered human hands, but it could not change the silence of an empty landscape. This is the limit that matters. A flame can soften meat, roast roots, warm stones, dry strips of flesh, and make hard seeds more useful. But it cannot make an animal walk closer. It cannot make a tree bear fruit out of season. It cannot pull fish into a river, bring rain to dry ground, or undo the long distance between hunger and the place where food might still be found. For ancient humans, fire was a great power, but it was not a miracle. It worked only after the world had already given something. This meant that many evenings may have held both human intelligence and human shortage at the same time. A group could know how to cook and still have little to cook. They could have embers glowing, smoke rising, children waiting, adults tired from the day, and only a small amount of food to divide. The fire made that food better, but it did not make it abundant. This difference is important because it keeps the story honest. Human evolution was not a simple march from darkness to comfort. Each new skill solved one problem while leaving other problems alive. Fire helped with chewing, digestion, warmth, protection, and social gathering. It may have allowed people to use foods that would have been less valuable raw, but the oldest problem remained outside the circle of light. Food still had to be found in a changing world. Animals still moved according to water, grass, fear, season, and chance. Plants still grew according to soil, rain, sunlight, and time. A hunting party could return empty. A gathering route could produce less than memory promised. A place that had been rich before could be poor when people arrived again. Fire could receive food, transform food, and stretch food, but it could not command the living world to provide. At the beginning of the human story, this created a deep tension. The human body was becoming more dependent on high-quality energy, yet the supply of that energy remained unstable. Cooking helped make calories easier to use, but it also made the evening meal more meaningful. If there was food beside the fire, the night could feel safer. If there was little food beside the fire, hunger became more visible. The smell of smoke, the warmth of bodies, the quiet sound of tools, and the glow on faces may have made the lack sharper, not softer. The fire showed what humans could do with the world, but hunger showed what the world had not given. In lean times, people may have used fire with great care. Small pieces could be roasted slowly, Bones could be heated and cracked. Tough plants could be softened. Foods that were bitter, hard, or difficult might become more edible after preparation. Nothing useful could be wasted easily, because the day's search had already cost strength. A little food near the fire was not just dinner. It was the recovered energy of walking, digging, tracking, carrying, waiting, and remembering. If that recovery was incomplete, the body still had to sleep with less than it needed. This is why the hungry night did not disappear when fire entered human life. It changed shape. Hunger was no longer only a raw struggle with teeth and stomach. It became a struggle around preparation, timing, sharing, and making the most from what had been found. The fire could make a poor meal warmer, safer, and more digestible, but it could not make it large. It could make the night more bearable, but not always more full. For a child, a small warm portion might matter greatly. For an elder, softened food might mean the difference between eating and being unable to chew enough. For a tired adult, cooked roots or meat could return strength more gently than raw food. These were real gains. But every gain depended on the same fragile beginning. Something had to be brought back before darkness. So the human night became a place where power and limits sat together. The fire burned as proof of intelligence. The empty stomach remained as proof of dependence. And between them, ancient humans learned one of the oldest lessons of survival. The ability to transform food is not the same as the ability to guarantee it. Cooking gave humans a new kind of power, but it was a power over food after contact, not before it. Once roots had been dug, once meat had been cut, once seeds had been gathered, once bones had been carried back, fire could change what those things meant for the body. It could turn toughness into softness. It could turn danger into something safer. It could turn small, difficult foods into meals that released more energy than raw chewing alone might allow, but the larger world remained outside human command. The tree still followed its own season. The herd still followed grass and water. The river still rose or fell. Rain still came late or too hard. Cold still closed certain paths. Heat still spoiled what could not be eaten, dried, smoked, or guarded in time. In that older world, humans had begun to change the way they ate, but they had not yet changed the deep uncertainty of where food came from. This distinction matters because it shows why hunger could remain so close to human sleep even after one of the greatest discoveries in our history. Fire made eating more human. It drew the group together, extended the evening, softened food for weaker mouths, and made sharing more organized. A piece of meat could be divided after roasting. Roots could be placed in ash and waited for. Seeds could be parched. Bones could be cracked near warmth. Children could watch adults prepare food and slowly learn that eating was not only biting, but knowing, waiting, transforming, and sharing. Around the fire, food became culture as well as fuel. Yet every one of those acts still began with a question the fire could not answer. What did the day bring back? If the answer was little, cooking could only make little more useful. It could not turn little into enough for everybody. A group might stretch a meal carefully, giving softer pieces to children, smaller portions to adults who could endure more, or warm liquid from cooked plants to someone tired or old. These choices show care, but they also reveal shortage. If food had always been secure, such careful division would not have carried the same weight. Human life grew around the fire, partly because fire helped solve hunger, but also because hunger never fully left. The flames made the old problem visible in a new way. They created a place where the day's success or failure could be seen, smelled, divided, and remembered. When there was enough, the fire became a center of relief. When there was not enough, it became a quiet witness to the limit of human skill. This is one of the deep patterns in human history. Our species often learned to transform conditions before it learned to control them. Humans could shape stone before they could control animal movement. They could use fire before they could control seasons. They could cook plants before they could make plants grow where and when they wished. They could share meat before they could guarantee another hunt. This long gap between transformation and control may explain why so much of early human life still carried hunger into the night. Intelligence changed the form of the struggle, but not its presence. The body still had to wait for the land. The brain still had to remember where food might be found. The group still had to decide how to divide what was available. Sleep still came after a day whose outcome could never be fully planned. Later, farming would change this relationship again, bringing fields, herds, stores, harvests, and new kinds of risk. But long before that, cooked food taught humans a quieter lesson. A thing can be improved without becoming certain. A meal can be warmer, softer, safer, and more nourishing, yet still too small. The fire could make the night feel more human, but hunger could still lie down beside it. And perhaps that is why the image remains so powerful. A circle of people near warmth, holding one of the greatest tools ever discovered, while beyond the edge of light the food of tomorrow is still hidden, moving, growing, ripening, or gone. Archaeology cannot recover the feeling of an empty stomach. It cannot tell us the exact thoughts of a person lying near a fire with too little food before sleep. It cannot preserve the silence of a hungry child, the careful look between adults, or the way a group divided a small meal when the day had not gone well. What it can preserve are harder traces: bones, teeth, stones, ash, shells, seeds, cut marks, hearths, grinding surfaces, storage pits, and the broken remains of animals and plants that once passed through human hands. These traces do not speak loudly, but together they point toward a life built around the search for energy. A stone flake with a sharp edge, a bone split open for marrow, a hearth filled with ash, a scatter of shells near an old shoreline, charred seeds under ancient soil, tooth wear from tough foods, or chemical signals in bones can all show that food was not a simple gift. It had to be found, opened, prepared, shared, and often stretched. The hunger itself is gone. The work around hunger remains. This is why the archaeological record is so important for a question like this. We cannot say that every ancient person went to sleep hungry on every night. No honest reading of deep history allows that certainty. Human lives were diverse. Some places were rich. Some seasons were generous. Some groups had deep knowledge of local foods and may have eaten well at certain times. But the evidence does show a long human dependence on many scattered food sources, and that dependence makes sense only in a world where no single source could always be trusted. In some places, archaeologists find bones of large animals with marks left by stone tools. In others, they find fish bones, shellfish, bird remains, seeds, nuts, tubers, grinding stones, burnt plant matter, and small animal bones. The variety matters. It suggests flexibility, intelligence, and adaptation, but it also suggests uncertainty. A species with guaranteed food would not need to be so attentive to every possible form of energy. Early humans and later hunter-gatherers drew life from many directions because the world did not feed them from one steady place. This variety also tells us something about the body. Meat could bring dense energy, but large animals were not always available. Plant foods could be reliable in some seasons, but often required gathering, processing, or cooking. Shellfish could be abundant in certain coastal places, but depended on tides, access, and local ecology. Seeds and nuts could be valuable, but small and labor-intensive. Bones cracked for marrow show that people did not ignore hidden calories. Grinding stones show that small hard foods could become important enough to change the movement of hands over many hours. Hearths show not only warmth but transformation, food made safer, softer, and more digestible. Each trace returns us to the same beginning of humanity, where bodies survived by turning attention toward a difficult landscape. The traces of food are also traces of time. A cut mark on bone is a brief moment of action. A worn tooth is a long record of repeated chewing. A hearth may hold the memory of many evenings. A shell mound can show repeated returns to a place where food could be gathered again and again. None of these objects says, by itself, that someone slept hungry that night, but they show a world in which eating required labor and planning before rest could come. They show that the path to sleep often passed through tools, fire, search, knowledge, and sharing. Hunger does not fossilize, but the effort to keep hunger away can leave marks in stone, ash, enamel, and bone. When we look at those marks carefully, the ancient night becomes a little clearer. We do not hear the stomach. We see the cracked bone. We do not hear the worry. We see the hearth. We do not hear the quiet hope for morning. We see the tools left behind by hands that had to keep finding food before darkness made the search harder again. Cut marks on ancient bones are small, but they carry a heavy meaning. They show that a human hand, or a hand from an earlier human relative, once used a sharp stone edge to remove flesh, open a joint, or reach a useful place inside the body of an animal. The mark itself is only a scratch in hard material, but behind it there was a sequence of actions: finding the animal, gaining access to it, keeping other scavengers away if necessary, cutting before decay went too far, dividing what could be used, and bringing some of that energy back toward others. Nothing about this was simple. A bone with cut marks does not tell us that the people nearby were starving, and it should not be forced to say more than it can. But it does tell us that meat and marrow were valuable enough to require tools, time, and attention. In the deep beginning of the human story, food often had to be opened before it could become food. Skin had to be pierced. Tendons had to be separated. Bones had to be broken. Shells had to be cracked. Seeds had to be ground. Roots had to be softened. The body's hunger was answered not by one act, but by many careful acts stacked together before night. Grinding stones tell a different version of the same story. Their worn surfaces may come from repeated contact with seeds, grains, nuts, pigments, or plant matter, depending on the place and period. When they are connected with food processing, they remind us that calories could be small, hard, scattered, and slow to prepare. A handful of seeds is not the same as a ready meal. It may need collecting, cleaning, pounding, grinding, mixing with water, roasting, or cooking. Each step spends energy before energy is returned. This is one of the quiet truths that archaeology makes visible. Ancient people were not simply eating what lay before them. They were changing difficult materials into usable nourishment. A hard seed became softer meal. A root became edible after heat. A bone became marrow after impact. A shellfish became food after the shell was opened. These are not dramatic scenes, but they are close to the center of human survival. They show hands working against the resistance of the world. Hearths and fire pits carry the same message in ash and burned stone. A hearth can mean warmth, light, gathering, protection and cooking, but it can also mean delay. Food placed near fire must be waited for. Meat must be turned. Roots must be watched. Damp wood must be coaxed into flame. Smoke must be endured. People may have sat near such fires with hunger growing sharper before the food was ready. The hearth made the evening more human, but it did not make food instant. It marked a place where raw findings were slowly changed into something the body could use. Around such places, social life gathered because food preparation often required more than one pair of hands. Someone might tend flame, someone might crack bone, someone might cut. Someone might hold a child, someone might watch the dark beyond the light. In this way, the archaeological record gives us a picture of hunger without ever showing hunger directly. It shows the labor that surrounded it. Living places add another layer. The remains of shelters, camps, caves, or repeated occupation areas often show that people returned to certain places where food, water, safety, stone, fuel, or roots made life possible. But returning to a place was not the same as having guaranteed food. A useful place was useful because it helped people meet need again and again. It was a point in a wider landscape of movement. Shells near a coast, animal bones near a hearth, plant remains in sediment, stone tools near a camp surface. Each trace suggests that people were building a relationship with the local world, learning where energy could be taken, processed, and shared. This relationship is at the root of human life. Long before food became a product, it was a problem solved through repeated knowledge. The marks left behind are therefore not only evidence of diet, they are evidence of effort. They show that going to sleep fed required a chain of success. The right place, the right timing, the right tool, the right fire, the right memory, the right cooperation. If any link weakened, the night could become thin. Archaeology does not let us hear the hungry body, but it lets us see how much work was needed to keep that body from lying down empty. The ancient record does not give us a sound, it gives us remains. A hearth cannot tell us whether the people around it felt satisfied when they lay down. A cracked bone cannot tell us how many mouths waited near the fire. A worn tooth cannot describe the heaviness of a body trying to sleep after a poor day of food. Yet when these traces are placed beside one another, a pattern appears. Human life was organized around the search for usable energy. Not around comfort first, not around choice first, but around the repeated need to find enough, process enough, and share enough before the night closed in. The evidence is often quiet. Bits of charcoal, fragments of shell, animal bones broken in certain ways, stone edges dulled by use, plant remains preserved by burning, grinding surfaces smoothed by repeated motion, teeth marked by long habits of chewing. None of these objects should be made to say more than they can. They do not prove a single emotion. They do not let us enter one ancient mind with certainty. But they do show that eating was work before it was relief. They show that the human body lived inside an economy of effort, where food had to be recognized, reached, opened, softened, carried, divided, and remembered. A modern meal can hide the labor behind it. It may arrive clean, cut, cooked, packaged, chilled, delivered, or ready to heat. The body receives the result without seeing the long chain of fields, animals, machines, roads, workers, markets, fuel, and storage that made it possible. Ancient people could not be separated from that chain because they were the chain. Their walking was transport, their memory was map, their hands were tools, their fire was kitchen, heat, light, and sometimes protection at once. Their social bonds were a form of security against the unevenness of the land. When archaeology shows us repeated food processing, it is showing us how much attention had to gather around one basic fact. The body cannot live on knowledge alone. Knowledge must become calories. A remembered tree must become fruit in the hand. A track must become meat, or at least a decision to keep moving. A hard seed must become something the gut can use. A bone must be opened before the marrow inside can matter. This is why hunger sits behind so many ancient objects, even when it is never directly visible. The tool is not hunger, but hunger helped make the tool necessary. The hearth is not hunger, but hunger helped gather bodies around it. The cut mark is not hunger, but hunger gave meaning to the act of cutting. The shell mound is not hunger, but it records repeated returns to a place where the edge between enough and not enough could be managed. Across the long beginning of humanity, energy was never only biological. It became social and cultural because bodies needed each other to meet the demands of the land. A single person might find food, but a group could remember more places, care for more vulnerable members, defend a fire, divide risk, and carry knowledge across generations. Archaeology hints at that wider life through camp patterns, repeated occupations, tools found near food remains, and the careful use of many different resources. It does not need to show a starving face to show a world where food was central. The absence of hunger from the record is not the absence of hunger from life. Some of the most important human experiences leave no direct fossil. Waiting, worry, hope, restraint, the quiet giving of a larger piece to a child, the choice to sleep with less so someone weaker can have more. These do not remain in the ground, but the need that produced them left marks everywhere. It left marks in stone, in bone, in ash, in tooth enamel, in the locations people returned to, and in the foods they learned to use with patience. To understand why so much of human history went to sleep hungry, we have to read these traces gently. They tell us not that the past was only misery, but that fullness was always an achievement. It had to be made from a world that was alive, resistant, and changing. And when enough was not made before dark, the body carried the unfinished work of the day into sleep. A child experiences hunger differently from an adult, even when both sit beside the same fire. The feeling may begin in the same place, but the consequences are not the same. An adult body has already been built. It may lose comfort, strength, warmth, or patience when food is scarce, but much of its growth is complete. A child is still becoming. Bones are lengthening. Muscles are forming. The brain is developing. The immune system is learning. Every day of life is part of construction. Because of this, food is not only fuel for the present, it is material for the future. In the long human past, this made children especially dependent on the success of others. A young child could not travel as far as a healthy adult. A child could not always identify safe plants, follow difficult tracks, crack bones, manage fire, or remember distant food locations. These abilities took years to learn. During those years, survival depended on care. This simple fact may have shaped human society more deeply than many tools or technologies. A species that raises children for such a long time cannot survive by individual effort alone. It must carry the young through periods of uncertainty. Hunger, therefore, became more than a bodily sensation. It became a test of social bonds. When food was limited, the group faced a quiet challenge: how to protect the future while surviving the present. Archaeology cannot show us every meal shared with a child, but biology helps explain why such sharing would have mattered. Human childhood is unusually long compared with many other animals. A young human spends years learning how to live in the local environment. Knowledge of food, seasons, dangers, tools, and movement is not inherited automatically. It must be observed, practiced, remembered, and passed on. This means that every child represents not only a hungry mouth, but also a future gatherer, hunter, parent, teacher, and memory keeper. In a difficult season, protecting children may have carried importance beyond immediate compassion. It may have helped preserve the continuity of the group itself. The same logic applies to older people, though in a different way. An elder might not move as quickly as a younger adult. Strength may decline, teeth may wear down. Injuries accumulated over many years could make long journeys more difficult. Yet older people often carry something that hunger cannot replace easily: experience. They remember where food was found during unusual weather. They know which plants are safe and which are dangerous. They remember old routes, old mistakes, and old seasons. In many traditional societies studied by anthropologists, knowledge held by older members can be extremely valuable, especially in harsh or changing environments. We should avoid assuming that every prehistoric group treated elders in exactly the same way. Human cultures vary widely. Still, the principle remains. A body with less physical strength may still hold information that helps other bodies survive. Hunger, therefore, creates a complicated picture. The strongest person is not always the most valuable person in every moment. A nursing mother carries nourishment for an infant. A child carries future potential. An elder carries memory. An injured adult may recover and contribute again if supported long enough. Food moves through these relationships. It becomes part of a wider calculation that the group makes, sometimes consciously and sometimes through customs built over generations. This does not mean ancient people lived in perfect cooperation. Human beings have always faced conflict, competition, and difficult choices. Scarcity can create tension as well as sharing, but the existence of long childhoods and extended care strongly suggests that humans evolved in social environments where food was often distributed according to more than immediate strength. If that had not been true often enough, raising vulnerable young would have been much harder. As darkness settled over an ancient camp, the question was not simply whether food had been found, it was also how that food would be divided among bodies that needed it for different reasons. The same meal could support growth, preserve memory, sustain milk, aid recovery, or prepare someone for the next day's search. Hunger revealed those differences. It reminded the group that survival was rarely carried by one body alone. It was carried by many bodies connected through need, dependence, and time. Hunger becomes more human when it is shared, because shared hunger is never only a private sensation. It moves through the group. It changes how people look at one another, how food is divided, how tomorrow is planned, and how much risk a body can take. In a solitary animal, hunger points mostly toward the next search. In humans, hunger also points toward relationships. A small piece of meat, a handful of seeds, a softened root, a shellfish, or a warm mouthful of cooked food can become part of a social decision. Who needs this most? Who can wait? Who walked far today? Who must nurse a child? Who remembers the place we may go tomorrow? Who is weak now, but may recover if given enough? These questions may not have been spoken in the same form everywhere, but the pressure behind them is ancient. Human beings did not survive the long past as isolated stomachs. They survived as bodies tied to other bodies. This is why going to sleep hungry was not only a biological condition, it was a social condition. If one person found food, others might live. If one person failed, the group might still be protected by someone else's success. If a child could not search, adults could search. If an elder could not walk far, memory could still guide younger feet. If an injured person could not gather today, past and future contribution could still matter. The group softened the sharp edge of hunger, but it also made hunger morally and emotionally complex. A meal had to pass through hands before it reached mouths. The beginning of the human story was shaped by this passage. Food was not simply taken from the world and swallowed. It was brought back into a circle of need. Around that circle, human cooperation became practical, not romantic. Sharing reduced risk because the world was uneven. One person might be lucky today and empty-handed tomorrow. One family might have more strength in one season and need help in another. A skilled gatherer might find plants when hunters found nothing. A hunter might bring meat when plant foods were scarce. A grandmother or grandfather might know a hidden food source from an earlier dry year. A nursing mother might depend on others while feeding an infant who could not wait. In such a life, hunger taught dependence again and again. It reminded people that no single body could always stand between itself and the uncertainty of the land. This does not mean every ancient group was peaceful or generous all the time. Scarcity can tighten the mind. It can create fear, resentment, exclusion, and hard choices. But the long survival of humans suggests that cooperation was strong enough, often enough, to become part of who we are. Our species carries a deep social response to food, because food was one of the first things that made society necessary. A hungry night could reveal the strength of that response. It could show whether the group could hold together when the day had given little. The fire might be small, the food might be divided carefully. Some might sleep with less than they wanted. Some might be given more because their need carried a future beyond themselves. In that quiet exchange, hunger became a force that shaped memory, care, obligation, and trust. It made the body ask not only, "Am I fed?" but "Are we able to continue?" This is why the title reaches into something larger than diet. To say that much of human history went to sleep hungry is also to say that much of human history went to sleep dependent. Dependent on the land, on weather, on animals, on plants, on fire, on tools, and on one another. The empty stomach was personal, but the answer to it was collective. A human being could feel hunger alone inside the ribs, yet the possibility of surviving that hunger often came from outside the self, from another hand, from remembered knowledge, from a shared path, from a portion saved, from the decision to feed someone weaker. In the ancient night, the group itself became part of the body's safety, and when there was not enough for everyone to feel full, the way food was shared may have mattered almost as much as the food itself. One of the most remarkable things about human beings is that food often moves farther than the hand that found it. A person may gather roots, catch fish, collect shellfish, find honey, or help bring down an animal, yet the food does not necessarily stay with that person alone. It enters a social world. It is carried back, divided, exchanged, prepared, discussed, remembered, and shared. This pattern appears in many hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists, though the exact rules vary widely from one group to another. The details change. The principle remains. Human survival has often depended not only on obtaining food, but on moving food through relationships. This may seem ordinary today, but it is actually a profound adaptation to uncertainty. The ancient landscape did not reward everyone equally every day. One person might return successful while another returned with little. One family might have access to a resource this week and lose it the next. Animals moved. Plants ripened and disappeared. Weather changed. Injuries happened. In such a world, keeping every success completely private could leave everyone more vulnerable over time. Sharing became a way of spreading risk across many bodies and many days. A successful hunt, for example, often produces more food than one person can immediately use, especially before long-term storage became reliable. Meat can spoil, marrow can be lost. Valuable calories can disappear if they are not consumed, preserved, or distributed. Sharing helps solve that problem. It turns one person's good fortune into a wider safety net. The same principle can apply to gathered foods, fish, shellfish, honey, and other resources depending on the environment. What matters is not that every meal was shared equally everywhere. Human societies are too varied for such a simple claim. What matters is that sharing appears again and again because uncertainty appears again and again. The human body evolved in a world where tomorrow's success could never be guaranteed. This helps explain why generosity around food can carry such emotional weight. Even today, offering food often feels different from offering many other objects. A meal touches something ancient. It reaches towards survival itself. Around an ancient fire, a portion of food was not only nourishment, it could represent trust, obligation, memory, kinship, gratitude, or expectation. A child receiving food from an adult was receiving more than calories. A nursing mother receiving extra food might be helping sustain an infant. An elder receiving food might preserve knowledge that benefited the group. A tired hunter receiving food after a poor day might be able to search again tomorrow. The movement of food through a community created resilience. This resilience mattered because hunger was rarely distributed evenly. A person could be unlucky without being unskilled. A day could be poor without anyone making a mistake. The landscape itself could shift beyond human control. Sharing helped absorb some of these fluctuations. It allowed the group to act as something larger than a collection of individuals. Food became a way of connecting separate lives into a common future. Archaeology cannot always show these moments directly. A pile of animal bones or a hearth cannot tell us exactly how food was divided. But the long human investment in cooperation, communication, teaching, and social bonds strongly suggests that food sharing played a meaningful role in many contexts. It helped transform survival from an individual struggle into a collective one. This does not mean hunger disappeared. The title of this video reminds us that it did not. Many nights still ended with bodies wanting more than the day had provided. Yet sharing could soften the edges of uncertainty. It could make a bad day less catastrophic. It could help children survive long childhoods. It could help injured adults recover. It could help older people remain part of the group. Most importantly, it could help ensure that a single failure did not become a permanent loss. The human story is often told through tools, fire, language, and migration. But another part of the story may have unfolded in quieter moments, when food passed from one hand to another. In those moments, people were not defeating hunger completely. They were building a way to endure it together. Sharing food was one way humans answered a world that did not feed the same person every day. The logic was simple, but very deep. Today, one body might return with more than it needs. Tomorrow, that same body might return with nothing. Today, one family might have strength, luck, knowledge, and good timing. Tomorrow, illness, injury, weather, or distance might make them dependent on others. In a landscape where food moved, ripened, hid, spoiled, and disappeared, the safest unit was not always the lone individual. It was the relationship. A person who gave food when there was enough could later receive food when the day had failed. This does not mean ancient sharing was always perfectly equal, gentle, or free of tension. Human beings are complicated, and scarcity can make any group feel pressure. But the basic pattern makes sense. When food supply is uneven, sharing can make life less fragile. It spreads the risk of hunger across time. It turns one successful day into protection against another person's unsuccessful day. It makes survival less dependent on a single body's luck. Imagine a small group at the edge of evening. One person has found a cluster of edible plants. Another has returned with little. Someone else has carried a child most of the day and had no chance to search as far. A younger adult has strength but no result. An older person knows where the group might go tomorrow but has not brought food today. If each body lived only from its own immediate success, hunger would cut through the group sharply and unevenly. But when food moves, even imperfectly, the group becomes more durable. The one who has more today helps the one who has less. Not because the world has become kind, but because everyone knows, through repeated experience, that the pattern can reverse. This kind of food sharing may have been especially important because ancient hunger was often unpredictable at the daily level. A skilled hunter could fail. A careful gatherer could arrive too late. A storm could prevent movement. A child could become sick. A familiar source could be empty. The human body evolved under these uncertainties, and social life helped buffer them. Sharing did not create abundance. It created continuity. It allowed people to keep moving through poor days without every poor day becoming a crisis for the weakest person alone. This is why food is never only material in the human story. It carries memory of yesterday and expectation of tomorrow. A portion given today may remember a portion received before. A shared meal may hold an unspoken promise that the group will not let temporary failure become immediate abandonment. Around ancient fires, this promise may have mattered as much as stone tools or strong muscles. Tools helped people get food. Sharing helped food protect more than the person who first touched it. That difference shaped human life. It allowed long childhoods to be possible, because children could be fed by more than one successful adult. It allowed injured people to recover, because a body unable to search for a few days did not necessarily disappear from the future. It allowed older people to remain valuable, because knowledge could still be fed even when strength declined. It allowed the group to carry memory through bodies that were not always physically productive in the moment. Hunger, then, did not only teach humans to search, it taught them to depend. Dependence can sound weak in a modern world that praises independence, but in deep history, dependence was often a form of intelligence. No one controlled the animals, the plants, the weather, or the season alone. No one could guarantee a full stomach every night by personal will. The group was a way of surviving what the individual could not command. When food was shared, hunger became less private. It remained painful, but it was held within a wider net. A hungry night might still come. People might still sleep with less than they wanted. But the knowledge that food could move between bodies gave the next day a different meaning. The search would begin again, not as one stomach against the world, but as a group carrying each other through the unevenness of the land. If food had always been plentiful, human sharing would not have needed to become so deep. People might still have eaten together, because humans are social, but the urgency would have been different. The careful movement of food between bodies makes most sense in a world where no one can fully trust tomorrow. A portion given away is not only an act of generosity, it is evidence that hunger has shaped the rules of living together. When food is scarce, the group must decide whether survival will be treated as a private matter or a shared one. Across much of human history, the answer seems to have leaned again and again toward sharing. Not perfectly, not everywhere in the same form, but strongly enough to become one of the central patterns of human life. This tells us something important about the title. If so much social life gathered around food, then food was not a small problem at the edge of existence. It was close to the center. The fire, the meal, the hunt, the gathered roots, the ripening tree, the stored scraps, the divided meat, the child fed before sleep, these were not background details. They were part of how humans answered the long uncertainty of being alive. A world of permanent abundance would not require the same memory of who shared last time, who needs help now, who can wait, who knows where to go, and who must be fed for the future to continue. Scarcity made these questions matter. It pressed food into the emotional and moral life of the group. This is why a meal can carry meaning far beyond the body. To give food is to say, in one of the oldest human languages, that another life matters. To receive food is to be held inside the group's protection. In the ancient world, this protection did not erase hunger. It only made hunger survivable more often. People still went to sleep with empty or half-empty stomachs. Children still cried. Adults still made difficult choices. Elders still depended on younger strength. A poor season could still test the whole group. But sharing meant that the burden did not always fall exactly where chance had placed it. A failed search by one person could be softened by another person's success. A weak body could be carried through a hard day by food found elsewhere. A child could grow because adults turned private effort into common nourishment. This is one of the quiet achievements of our species. Humans did not simply invent tools to cut the world open. They also created social habits that moved energy from one body to another. The body needed calories, but the human way of obtaining calories became social. In this sense, Hunger helped build community, not because hunger was good, and not because suffering should be romanticized, but because repeated shortage made cooperation valuable. The ancient group that shared food had a better way to endure the unevenness of the land than a group of isolated individuals. Yet the very need for sharing shows the deeper truth. The world did not provide equally enough for everyone at all times. If every day had ended full, if every person had always found what they needed, if children, elders, mothers, injured people, and tired adults had all been naturally protected by abundance, then sharing would have been less urgent as a survival system. Its importance points backward to hunger itself. It shows that humans had to build social answers to a biological problem the landscape kept repeating. That is why the hungry night is also a social night. Around the fire, the empty stomach was not only a private ache under the ribs, it was part of a wider web of obligation, memory, and care. Someone had eaten because someone else had found. Someone had less because someone else needed more. Someone remembered where to search because earlier hunger had taught the group not to forget. Someone slept lightly because tomorrow's food was still uncertain. The human body lay down hungry, but it did not always lie down alone. It lay down inside a circle of other bodies shaped by the same old pressure. And if that circle mattered so much, it is because fullness was never guaranteed enough to be taken for granted. Farming changed the human relationship with hunger, but it did not end hunger. It is easy to imagine agriculture as the moment when people finally stepped out of uncertainty. Seeds placed in soil, animals kept near home, fields watched through the season, grain stored for later, villages growing where movement once ruled. Compared with foraging alone, farming did give human communities new powers. It allowed food to be planned over longer periods. It made some landscapes more predictable. It produced harvests large enough to support denser populations, permanent settlements, specialists, builders, rulers, priests, traders, and eventually cities. A field could be returned to year after year in a way that a wild fruiting tree, a moving herd, or a seasonal shoreline could not always be relied upon. A storage jar, a granary, or a protected herd could turn food into something that reached beyond today. In that sense, agriculture was one of the great attempts to answer the old human fear of the empty night. It tried to make tomorrow visible. It tried to make hunger negotiable, but it did not make hunger disappear. It changed the shape of hunger. Instead of depending mainly on wild animals, scattered plants, tides, and seasonal gathering, farming communities became tied to fields, rainfall, soil, pests, stored seed, labor, and social organization. A harvest could be good, but it could also fail. A crop could grow well for weeks, then be damaged by drought, flood, frost, insects, disease, conflict, or poor storage. A village could spend months waiting for plants that were not yet ready to eat. The promise of farming was future food, and that promise could become painful when the present body was hungry. This is one of the quiet ironies of agriculture. It gave humans more control over food than before, but it also tied many people to a smaller range of staple foods. In some regions, grain, rice, millet, maize, tubers, or other crops became central to daily life. These foods could sustain large populations, but dependence on them also created vulnerability. If the main crop failed, the danger could spread through many bodies at once. In a foraging world, people often used a wide variety of foods, though with uncertainty and effort. In a farming world, people could produce more food in one place, but they could also become deeply dependent on the success of that place. The beginning of agricultural life was therefore not a simple escape from the hungry past. It was another negotiation with hunger, built around waiting, storing, guarding, and hoping the season would hold. Archaeology and history both remind us that early farming could be physically demanding. Fields had to be cleared, planted, weeded, watered, harvested, processed, and defended. Grain had to be ground. Animals had to be managed. Stored food had to be protected from rot, insects, rodents, theft, and moisture. Food became more planned, but planning required work and could still fail. A community might look more settled from the outside, with houses, paths, hearths, pottery, and storage spaces, yet the bodies inside those houses could still face shortage. The night after planting was not the night of eating. The night before harvest could be a thin night. The last stored grain before the new crop came in could carry enormous meaning. People could live closer together than before, but closeness also meant more mouths depending on the same stores. A bad season could turn settlement into anxiety. Farming also changed time itself. Hunger became linked to the long wait between sowing and harvest, between birth and maturity of animals, between storage and depletion. Instead of asking only what the land would offer today, humans began asking whether the field would survive months of uncertainty. This gave rise to new forms of memory, ritual, labor, ownership, inequality, and control. Some people might have more access to stored food than others. Some households might endure a poor season better. Some communities might store enough, while others failed. So, agriculture answered one ancient problem by creating another kind of dependence. It made food more visible in the future, but not guaranteed in the body tonight. And when the sun went down over early fields and villages, the old question had not vanished. It had only moved into the soil, the storehouse, the weather, and the waiting stomach. A field can look like control from a distance. Straight rows, stored seed, cleared ground, tools, fences, irrigation channels, and houses all suggest that humans have finally persuaded the earth to answer them. But a field is still a living bargain. It depends on rain arriving, neither too little nor too much. It depends on soil holding strength. It depends on insects not taking too large a share, disease not spreading through the crop, animals not breaking in, conflict not interrupting labor, and stored food not rotting before it is needed. Farming made food more planned, but planning is not the same as certainty. A community could work hard for months and still face a harvest that failed. That failure did not only mean disappointment, it could mean the return of an ancient hunger inside a more crowded world. When hunter-gatherers faced shortage, movement was often one possible answer, though not always an easy one. A farming village had a different problem. Its houses, fields, stores, tools, graves, paths, and social ties were fixed more strongly to one place. People could not always leave without losing the very system that was supposed to feed them. The crop tied them to the soil tied them to the season tied them to waiting. This made agricultural hunger feel different from older forms of hunger. It could build slowly as stored grain became smaller, as the next harvest remained uncertain, as rain failed to come, or as pests spread quietly through the field. The body might still feel hunger in the same old way, but the cause had become larger, more organized, and harder to escape. A failed hunt could leave a group hungry for a night. A failed harvest could leave many people hungry for months. This is why early farming did not simply replace uncertainty with abundance. It concentrated uncertainty. More people could live from the same land when things went well. More people could suffer when that land failed. The granary, the pot, the basket, the storage pit, and the herd were all attempts to hold the future still, but the future remained unstable. Stored food could be eaten by rodents, spoiled by dampness, stolen in conflict, claimed by leaders, lost in fire, or consumed too quickly during a longer lean season than expected. Grain could keep better than many wild foods, but it still required protection. Herd animals could provide meat, milk, hides, labor, or status in some societies, but they also needed pasture, water, health, and defense. A drought could weaken animals and crops together. War could destroy fields before they fed anyone. Disease could move through dense settlements. In such conditions, the hungry night did not disappear behind village walls. It entered them. It sat near storage jars. It watched the level of grain fall. It made people count what remained before the new crop came. It made parents worry about children, elders, and workers whose strength was needed for the next season. Agriculture also brought the possibility of inequality and hunger. In a small mobile group, differences in access to food could exist. But stored surplus allowed differences to become more structured in many later societies. Some people could control grain, land, animals, labor, or storage. Some could eat better while others ate less. Some households could survive a bad season with reserves, while others reached hunger sooner. This does not mean every farming village was harsh or unequal in the same way. Human societies varied widely, but the storage of food created new questions. Who owns the harvest? Who guards it? Who distributes it? Who receives it when the store grows low? The old problem of not enough food became entangled with power. Hunger was still biological, but it was also political and social. The beginning of farming, therefore, did not erase the long memory of going to sleep hungry. It placed that memory inside walls, fields, and systems of labour. People now waited not only for animals to pass or fruits to ripen, but for crops to mature under uncertain skies. They could see the field every day and still not know whether it would truly feed them. They could sleep beside stored grain and still fear how long it would last. The human body had entered a new chapter of food production, yet it still carried the same vulnerable truth. Energy promised for tomorrow cannot fully quiet the hunger of tonight. Agriculture did not remove the old fear of sleeping hungry. It gave that fear new places to live. It moved into the field before rain came, into the granary when the stored grain sank lower, into the seed kept aside for planting, into the animals that had to survive winter, into the hands that ground food day after day, and into the minds of people who had learned to wait months for the earth to answer. A farming community could look more secure than a wandering group. Houses stood in one place. Paths became familiar. Pots held grain. Smoke rose from hearths that did not need to be rebuilt every few nights. Children could grow up knowing the same fields, the same walls, the same water source, the same burial ground. But this stillness carried its own kind of vulnerability. When food depends on a harvest, hunger can become a long shadow stretching across the year. It can begin quietly before anyone is starving. It begins when the last stored food must be measured carefully. It begins when the rain is late. It begins when the seed grain must not be eaten, even though bodies are hungry. It begins when a family knows that food exists, but eating too much tonight may weaken the chance of planting tomorrow. This was a new form of the ancient problem. The question was no longer only whether food could be found before dark. It was whether a whole season of labour would become enough food to carry people through the next season of need. Farming made humans think in longer lines of time. Foragers had also remembered seasons, places, and cycles, but agriculture made waiting central in a different way. The field was a promise that could not be rushed. Seeds had to disappear into soil before they could return as food. Animals had to grow before they could be used. Stores had to be protected from the present appetite because the future depended on them. In this world, hunger before sleep could be tied to discipline as well as shortage. People might have food stored somewhere, but not enough to eat freely. They might hold back grain for seed. They might save part of a herd. They might ration because the next harvest was far away. The stomach wanted relief tonight, while the community had to think about months ahead. That tension shaped early settled life. It also shaped history. Once food could be stored, counted, owned, and guarded, hunger became connected to systems larger than the body. A poor harvest could weaken a village, but decisions about storage and distribution could decide who suffered first. A drought could reduce the crop, but power could decide whose bowl grew smaller. A war could destroy fields, but fear of hunger could also push groups to defend land, raid neighbours, migrate, trade, or submit to authority. The old empty stomach began to stand behind walls, laws, taxes, debts, granaries, rituals, and prayers for rain. This does not make agriculture a mistake. Without farming, many later human worlds would not have existed. Large settlements, writing in some regions, organized labor, long-distance trade, specialized crafts, and much of recorded history. Agriculture gave humans enormous new possibilities, but it did not create a simple world of fullness. It created a world where hunger could be managed, delayed, hidden, distributed unevenly, and sometimes made worse by dependence on a narrow food base. The ancient body still had to sleep inside uncertainty. Only now the uncertainty might not be a silent forest beyond the fire. It might be a field under a dry sky. It might be a jar with too little grain. It might be a storehouse, controlled by someone else. It might be a crop not yet ready while children were already hungry. In this sense, the history of agriculture is not the end of the hungry night. It is the history of humans trying to organize the hungry night, to count it, store against it, pray against it, plan against it, and pass through it with fewer losses. The fear did not vanish. It became woven into calendars, harvests, work, settlement, and social order. And as the sun went down over the first villages, The question that had followed humans since deep prehistory remained quietly alive. Would the food of the earth be enough before the body had to lie down again? Today, many human bodies live in a food world that would have seemed almost impossible for most of our ancestors. Food can wait in cold storage for days or weeks. Grain can cross oceans. Fruit can arrive outside its local season. Meat can be frozen, packaged, transported, and sold far from the place where the animal lived. A person can wake at night and still find something to eat without walking into darkness, reading tracks, gathering fuel, or waiting for a fire to grow hot. For many people, food has become less like a moving part of nature and more like a constant background. It sits near the body. It waits behind doors. It appears under electric light. It can be chosen by preference, price, habit, memory, or comfort. This is a very new arrangement in human history. It may feel normal because we were born into it, but measured against the long beginning of our species, it is unusual. The human body spent most of its deep past living with food as something uncertain, seasonal, effortful, shared, and easily lost. Now, in many places, the body lives beside food that is visible, stored, advertised, processed, and available at nearly every hour. The old body has entered a new room. That mismatch does not need to be exaggerated to matter. We do not have to pretend that every modern person has enough food, because that is not true. Hunger still exists today, and for many people it is painfully real. But for those living inside food abundance, the relationship has changed in a profound way. The body still responds to hunger as if it is meaningful, while the mind may treat it as a temporary inconvenience. The body still stores energy carefully, while the environment may keep offering more. The body still pays attention to sweetness, fat, salt, warmth, smell, and texture, because these signals once helped humans recognize valuable energy. But modern food systems can place those signals everywhere, often separated from the older effort of finding, preparing, and sharing food. In the beginning of humanity, energy-rich food usually came with work, timing, distance, and uncertainty. Today, energy can appear without the journey. This is not a moral failure of the body. It is history inside biology. The body is not designed around the supermarket shelf. It is shaped by long ages of searching before eating, saving when possible, and responding strongly when energy appeared. In the ancient world, a sweet fruit, a fatty piece of meat, marrow inside bone, honey, cooked starch, or oily nuts could be important. Such foods gave the body dense energy in a world where energy was often hard to secure. The desire for them made sense. It helped living bodies notice what mattered. In a modern environment where energy-dense food can be constant, that same desire lives in a different setting. The signal is old. The surroundings are new. This is why the story of hungry sleep does not end when food becomes plentiful. It changes into another question. What happens when a body shaped by shortage lives among constant availability? The answer is not simple, and it should not become a lecture about what anyone should eat. This is not a health instruction. It is a historical way of seeing the body. The modern person who feels hungry before bed may be safe, but the body's reaction still comes from a long past in which hunger before sleep could matter greatly. The modern person who feels drawn to food late at night may not be weak, but carrying an ancient attention toward energy. The modern person who expects regular meals is living inside a recent system that the body did not have for most of its formation. Across deep time, humans learned to sleep with uncertainty. Across recent time, many humans have learned to sleep near abundance. Between those two worlds, the body carries a memory older than the house around it. It remembers that food was once found, not guaranteed. It remembers that fullness was once an achievement. And even in a room where food waits quietly nearby, the old body may still listen for the sound of tomorrow's hunger. The modern body still reacts to hunger with ancient seriousness. Even when there is no immediate danger, hunger can change the inner atmosphere of a person. It can make the mind return to food again and again. It can make patience thinner. It can make the body feel colder, weaker, more restless, or more awake than it expected to be. It can make sleep feel delayed, not because the room is unsafe, but because the body has received a signal that once carried real weight. In the older world, hunger before sleep could mean that the day's search had not restored enough energy. It could mean that tomorrow's movement would begin from a smaller reserve. It could mean that cold would be harder to endure, that a child might need more than adults could easily give, that a wound might ask for repair while food was low, or that the group would need to change direction with morning light. Today, for many people, hunger may come in a house with walls, in a bed with blankets, near stored food, under artificial light. Yet the body does not fully know how recent that safety is. It responds from a deeper pattern. The stomach empties, blood energy shifts, hormones and nerves carry signals, and the brain begins to attend. This attention is not accidental. Across human history, attention to hunger helped living bodies survive. A body that ignored hunger completely would not search, remember, ask, gather, hunt, cook, or share with enough urgency. Hunger pulled awareness toward the future. It said, in the language of the body, energy must be found again. But in the modern world, this old signal often meets a very different environment. Food may be close, constant, varied, soft, dense, sweet, salty, fatty, and easy to eat without the long labor that once surrounded it. The body's desire to store energy also makes sense in the old world. A body that could save some energy after a rich meal had a better chance of passing through a poor day. Fat storage was not a flaw in deep history. It was protection against uncertainty. Thirst for energy-rich food was not foolish. It was part of surviving a landscape where such foods were valuable and not always available. But when the environment changes faster than biology, old protections can feel confusing. A body shaped by shortage may live among signals of abundance. It may still guard energy carefully. It may still respond strongly to calorie-rich foods. It may still dislike the feeling of emptiness before sleep, even when the mind knows that food will be available tomorrow. This is not a reason to turn the story into advice or judgment. It is simply a way to understand why the modern body can feel ancient inside modern comfort. Tiredness, craving, restlessness, and light sleep around hunger are not only personal moods. They are connected to the long history of a species that had to keep matching energy needs to an uncertain world. The body also remembers rhythm. For most of human existence, food did not arrive at fixed hours with perfect predictability. There were likely patterns, habits, and preferred times, but not the steady schedule that many modern people now treat as normal. The body could experience plenty, shortage, waiting, sudden opportunity, sharing, and restraint within the same life. Today, regular meals can make hunger feel like an error when it appears at the wrong time. But to the older body, hunger was not an error. It was information. It told people whether the day had been enough. It told the group whether tomorrow needed a different search. It helped mark the boundary between safety and need. That is why hunger can still wake something quiet in the night. It is not only the body asking for food now. It is the body carrying the memory of countless evenings when food, warmth, sleep, and survival were tied together. Modern abundance may change the room, the tools, the light, and the distance to the next meal, but it does not completely erase the old response. The body still listens when the stomach is empty. It still prepares when energy feels low. It still carries the habit of a past in which going to sleep hungry was not unusual, and waking had to begin with the search again. To look at hunger through history is not to tell anyone how to eat tonight. It is not a rule, a warning, a diet, or a cure. It is only a way of placing the modern body back inside the long landscape that shaped it. The feeling of hunger can be personal, but its roots are older than personal choice. Long before people argued about meals, schedules, portions, or habits, the human body had already learned that food was tied to survival, movement, warmth, memory, and care. Hunger meant something because energy meant everything. Without energy, the brain could not keep its watch. The muscles could not travel the land. The hands could not dig, carry, cut, scrape, grind, or hold a child. The body could not keep warm through cold nights. Wounds could not repair as easily. Milk could not be made without cost. Children could not grow. Elders could not be carried by memory alone. Every human life rested on the daily problem of turning the outside world into living strength. That is the older story beneath the modern stomach. Today, a hungry evening may happen for many reasons. Someone may be busy. Someone may be poor. Someone may choose to eat later. Someone may live in abundance but still feel uneasy when the stomach is empty. These situations are not the same, and they should not be treated as if they are. But the body's language is ancient in all of them. It speaks in energy, caution, attention, warmth, fatigue, and sleep. It does not speak in modern explanations first. A person may know that food is available, yet the body may still respond as if the night is asking a serious question. This is not because the body is foolish. It is because the body was shaped by a world in which food was rarely detached from risk. In that world, hunger before sleep could mean that the search had ended without enough. It could mean that morning would require more movement. It could mean that the group had to share more carefully, remember more accurately, or move to another place. When we understand this, hunger becomes less like a simple discomfort and more like a historical signal. It tells us that the body is carrying a memory of scarcity, even when the room around it has changed. This way of seeing can make us more honest, not more extreme. It reminds us that modern abundance is not the natural baseline of human life. It is a recent achievement, unevenly distributed, fragile in some places, and built on long systems of farming, storage, transport, labor, and cooperation. It also reminds us that the body is not separate from the past. The same body that may open a refrigerator at midnight descends from bodies that watched fruit ripen, followed animal paths, waited for rain, cracked bones for marrow, fed children first, and slept near fire with less food than they wanted. There is no need to turn that history into fear. The point is quieter than that. The point is to recognize that hunger is one of the old languages of being alive. It connected the first humans to land, season, other people, and the limits of the body. In a modern world, that language can be confusing because the environment has changed so quickly. Food can be near, but the body still carries older rhythms. Fullness can be common, but the memory of uncertainty remains beneath it. To understand hunger historically is to understand the human body with more patience. It lets us see that the modern self is not floating outside time. It is resting on a long chain of people who found, cooked, shared, saved, and sometimes lacked food before sleep. Their nights do not tell us what to do in a simple way. They only remind us that the body has a past, and that even the quiet feeling of an empty stomach belongs to a story much older than the room we sleep in. When we look back across the long human story, the ordinary meal begins to look less ordinary. It stands at the end of a very old chain. Before a bowl, there was a field or a forest, a river or a grassland, a shoreline or a dry hillside. Before cooked food, there was fuel gathered, fire protected, stones struck, roots dug, bones cracked, animals followed, seeds collected, shells opened, fruit watched, and memory carried from one generation to the next. Before a person could lie down with warmth in the stomach, someone had to meet the world and bring part of it back alive enough to feed the body. This is easy to forget because modern food often arrives without the visible struggle attached to it. It can appear clean, cut, stored, wrapped, measured, transported, and ready. But for most of human history, food carried the marks of distance, weather, risk, and labor. A meal was not only something eaten, it was the result of the day not failing completely. It was the result of bodies moving through uncertainty and returning with enough to continue. That is why the question of hungry sleep reaches so deeply. It is not simply about starvation, and it is not a claim that every ancient night was empty. It is about the older baseline of human life, where fullness had to be made again and again, a fire had to be kept, a path had to be remembered, a season had to be read, a child had to be fed, a tool had to be held in the hand, a group had to decide how to divide what the day had allowed. In the hunter-gatherer world, hunger followed the movement of animals, plants, tides, rainfall, and cold. In the farming world, hunger moved into fields, storage jars, harvests, droughts, pests, and unequal control of grain. In the modern world, for many people, hunger lives beside abundance in a body that still remembers scarcity. The setting changed, but the body's need remained constant. Energy still has to enter the living system. The brain still needs fuel. The heart still works through the night. The child still grows from food. The injured body still repairs from what it can use. The old human problem did not vanish. It was answered, softened, organized, and sometimes hidden by culture, technology, and cooperation. Seen this way, every meal becomes a small historical event. It carries fire within it, even when no flame is visible. It carries farming, even when no field is seen. It carries tools, even when no stone edge remains. It carries migration, memory, hunger, sharing, and the slow work of countless people who learned how to keep the body alive in a world that never promised to feed it evenly. The ancient night gathers behind it, the cold dark near a fire, the thin meal after a long walk, the careful portion given to a child, the hope that morning would reveal food somewhere beyond the camp. This long background does not make a modern meal less peaceful. It can make it more meaningful. It reminds us that eating was never merely a habit. It was survival turned into culture. It was biology held inside community. It was the answer to the oldest question a body asks before sleep. Is there enough energy to let go for a few hours? The answer was often uncertain. Sometimes it was yes. Sometimes it was almost. Sometimes it was no, but the body had to lie down anyway. Across deep time, humans learned to rest inside that uncertainty. They slept beside fire, under skins, in caves, on open ground, near rivers, in early villages, beside stored grain, and later inside houses. Again and again, they carried the same need into the dark. And from that need came movement, invention, memory, care, and the long human effort to make tomorrow less hungry than tonight. A normal meal can feel too small to notice. It may come at the end of a day without ceremony, placed on a table, eaten while thinking about something else, cleared away and forgotten. But when it is placed against the full depth of human history, it becomes one of the quietest achievements our species ever built. To eat before sleep is not only to satisfy appetite, it is to receive the work of many generations who learned how to make the world less uncertain than it once was. The grain in a bowl carries the memory of people who saved seeds, watched seasons, protected harvests, and learned to store food against lean months. The cooked food carries the memory of fire kept alive through countless nights. The shared dish carries the memory of groups who discovered that one body's success could protect another body's hunger. The tools, fields, roads, markets, kitchens, and storage systems around modern food are all late answers to an ancient problem: how to keep the body from entering darkness with too little strength. This does not mean hunger belongs only to the past. It does not. Many people in the present still know the fear of not enough food. That truth should make the history more serious, not less. Modern abundance is real for some, fragile for others, and absent for many. It is not the natural condition of being human. It is something made, maintained, distributed, and sometimes denied. When we remember the long, hungry past, we can see more clearly that food security is not a simple personal convenience. It is a social achievement. It depends on soil, water, climate, farmers, workers, transport, storage, peace, fairness, knowledge, and care. A full stomach before sleep may feel private, but it is supported by a world of relationships. In that way, the ancient lesson remains close. No human body truly feeds itself alone. Even the person eating in silence is being carried by systems larger than the self. This is one educational value of looking at hunger through deep time. It can soften the illusion that a meal is obvious. It can teach gratitude without turning suffering into romance. The hungry nights of ancient people were not beautiful because they were hungry. They were meaningful because people endured them, learned from them, organized around them, and slowly built ways to reduce their power. They found foods other animals ignored. They used fire to unlock energy. They shaped tools. They remembered landscapes. They fed children through long dependence. They cared for elders who carried knowledge. They shared when sharing was the difference between one bad day and a broken life. Later they planted, harvested, stored, traded, cooked, recorded, and planned. Not all of this was gentle. Agriculture brought labor, inequality, conflict, and new vulnerabilities. Stored food could support cities, but it could also be controlled. Fields could feed many, but they could also fail. Yet beneath all these complications was the same old human effort, to make hunger less absolute, to make tomorrow less exposed, to make sleep more possible. If a listener tonight has eaten enough, that simple fact connects to a chain of history longer than memory. It connects to hands that gathered in cold, walked through dry seasons, waited for rain, carried children, protected fires, cracked bones, ground seeds, saved grain, and divided small portions when there was not enough. If a listener has known hunger, the same history says something else. That hunger has never been a weakness of the individual body. It has always been a condition shaped by the world around the body. The body asks for energy because it is alive. It asks for warmth, repair, thought, movement, and rest. When food is missing, the problem is not merely in the stomach. It is in the relationship between the body and the systems that should sustain it. To understand this is to treat hunger with more dignity. It is to see a meal not as a small routine, but as one of the oldest forms of human protection. A bowl of food, a piece of bread, a cooked root, a shared portion near fire, a stored sack of grain, a quiet dinner before sleep, each one belongs to the same long answer. For most of our past, the night often arrived before enough had been found. When enough does arrive, it is worth seeing it clearly. It is not ordinary in the deep history of our species. It is the result of countless human attempts to keep the dark from swallowing the body's need. Hunger is not only the absence of food. It is a message about the relationship between a body and the world that surrounds it. When the stomach is empty, the body is not merely asking for taste or comfort. It is asking whether the world will provide enough energy for warmth, thought, movement, repair, care, and another morning. Across most of human history, that question did not have a simple answer. It was carried through cold nights, dry seasons, failed searches, moving animals, hidden routes, uncertain rivers, guarded fires, stored grain, and shared meals. The human body was shaped in that uncertainty. It learned to notice shortage. It learned to value energy. It learned to rest even when not fully reassured. It learned that food was never only personal, because one body's hunger could become the concern of many bodies around it. This is why the story of sleeping hungry reaches beyond the stomach. It reaches into the making of human memory, cooperation, patience, and invention. A hungry night could teach a group where not to return. A thin meal could teach children the importance of watching older hands. A small portion given away could preserve a weaker life. A season of shortage could make people remember water, animals, seeds, roots, weather, and time with greater care. Hunger pressed the human mind toward the future. It made tomorrow important before tomorrow had arrived. It made the body sleep beside unfinished need, and then rise again to search, gather, cook, share, plant, store, and try once more. Over thousands of generations, this repeated pressure helped build the long human answer to uncertainty. Fire was part of that answer. Tools were part of it. Language, teaching, sharing, farming, storage, trade, and social trust were all part of it. None of them erased hunger completely. They only made hunger less absolute, less lonely, less able to break the body at once. And perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons hidden in this long history. Human beings were not made by comfort alone. They were also made by the need to continue when comfort was not available. But that does not mean hunger should be praised. Hunger is not noble by itself. It weakens bodies, burdens children, tests families, and exposes the fragility of every living thing. The value is not in hunger. The value is in what humans slowly built against it. Care, memory, skill, cooperation, and the ability to see food as more than a private possession. A meal before sleep is one of the oldest forms of peace. It tells the body, at least for tonight, that the search has paused safely. It tells the brain that it can lower its watch a little. It tells the child, the elder, the tired adult, and the healing body that life has been given another small protection. In the deep past, that protection was never guaranteed. Today, when it exists, it carries the weight of all the nights when it did not. So the next time a simple meal appears before darkness, it may be worth seeing it not as something small, but as the end of a very long human labour. Behind it stand hands that gathered, fires that burned, Fields that waited, grains that were stored, animals that moved, rivers that changed, and people who shared what little they had. The body that eats tonight is still connected to the bodies that once lay down hungry beneath open skies. Their world is gone, but not entirely. It remains in the way hunger catches attention, in the way food gives comfort, and in the quiet relief of sleeping with enough. And if the human body still carries that old memory, then perhaps the final question is not only why so much of human history went to sleep hungry, but what that hunger taught us to become.